Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are thrilled to have you. We're going to give everyone just a moment to get in and get settled, but we're thrilled to have you at CLOE's 12 months of leadership session with the incredible Ron Hamilton. We'll be getting started in just a moment, so get settled in. All right. So, good afternoon. My name is Celine Krzan, and I'm a professor here at the University of Buffalo School of Management. And we are over the moon that we get to present to you this incredible session, The Power of Connection with Ron Hamilton, UB alum, UB MBA alum, double degree. And we're going to be really digging into cultivating inclusive and purpose driven leadership. Now, before we get started and really dig in and introduce Ron, I just want to remind you and just give you a little background, a little housekeeping before we jump in. So today's session is presented to you by the incredible Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness, CLOE, as we lovingly call it. CLOE is led by the incredible director, Dr. Dorothy Samoa, and we have an incredible team. Maddie is joining the call. She will be in the chat and in the Q&A box. She is here to help you with any tech needs or any technical aspects that you have throughout our session today. Now, if you have questions throughout the session, we will save some time at the end for Q&A. You'll see that this is a webinar session, not your typical Zoom meeting. So if you have questions that you want to drop in, you can drop them into this Q&A box. So you'll see here right in our little circle, drop in Q&A anytime throughout our session that we're talking about today. And I'd be happy to bring those up during our conversation with Ron today. So without further ado, I'm going to pull Ron up to the stage. I'm going to replace his spotlight and just do a quick intro and welcome. Ron, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read a little bit of your bio because I think it just sets the stage really beautifully before we jump into our conversation. Ron is a senior vice president, head of risk and compliance at BMS, a global insurance and reinsurance brokerage specialist. He has over 25 years of experience. Ron has held senior roles in enterprise risk management, compliance, regulatory functions at Swiss Re, GE, and earlier contributions at HSBC and M&T Bank. He is committed to service and community, having chaired the UBG Federal Credit Union and supports financial literacy and mentorships initiatives. We're also really grateful and thrilled to have him as an advisor at the UB School of Management Dean's Advisory Council and Leadership Roundtable. As I said, Ron holds a BS and MBA from the University of Buffalo and is certified in Six Sigma, ProSci Change Management, with designations including CPCU, ARE, and a number of other certifications. So Ron, welcome, 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 and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. And you read too much of the bio, but we'll get
Forgive
past
me.
that.
Forgive
Yeah,
me. We'll
you.
move on.
Thank you.
There's just so much to share. So do you mind? Let's jump right into the conversation and let's get
Let's
started
go.
off with what does inclusive leadership really mean to you? And why is it important in our business world today?
So inclusive leadership. Imagine someone new sitting in a new organization, young, coming from a different organization, taking notes furiously in a meeting with a lot of senior execs. And the CEO reaches out to this person and say, would you share your contribution with the team? Um, and why is that important? Because this person felt uncomfortable. The CEO gave them permission to sort of show up and add their contributions. Inclusive leadership is about prioritizing psychological safety, being able to ask those questions, being able to be yourself, active listening, seeking perspective from different individuals. People want to belong, they want to be included and respected, seen and heard. These differing opinions lead to better decisions, they lead to blind spots that you may have missed, and ultimately sustain success. So I think inclusive leadership is the way to go, especially now as things change much more quickly than they've ever changed before. There isn't a playbook for what's happening. You need all the perspectives around the table to make sure that you can move forward.
Right. I think that's such a critical point and something that we talk a lot about and what the research shows us with all these different generations in the
Mm.
workplace, a sense of belonging and a sense of building connections is so critical.
Very important. Building connections is important. And let's just maybe shift it a bit. Connections. During COVID, how many virtual happy hours were there? How many games were played? Because
Right.
people need connection. I think that's a human desire. I am a very tech person. I love my phone. I took it to Curacao and I made the mistake of sort of switching carriers while in transit. The latest iPhone, but without connection to the network, it was useless. It had no
Mhm.
valuable. So you need to be connected to make sure that you can function well and add the value that's important to you.
I love that point. So, in that idea of building meaningful connections, how do you build meaningful connections within teams and organizations?
It has to be intentional. It just doesn't happen overnight. You need to make a bit of investment. And as a leader, what do I do to sort of create this intentionality? Sharing office hours, uh, casual connects, um, doing virtual coffee. I'm here, no agenda. Let's just connect. Let's just talk about what it is. Taking a few moments at the beginning of a meeting to share something that connects me with the larger audience. As I should have shared when we started this meeting, is um, I'm from Buffalo. My wife is from Kansas City. We both went to the game. I'm not happy. She's happy, but we know happy wife, happy life. So
Yes.
you share those things that bring a bit of connection together, common interest that may be there. But more importantly, as a leader, being vulnerable, being transparent, sharing those moments when you say, I don't know, or I would have done things differently had I known this. I remember last year I was having a conversation with our group COO. She had just led a meeting, it went fantastic. And she came back and she said, well, I got some feedback from the CEO that I should have done some things differently. I was in awe because you look at certain execs like they're perfect, but you realize that they have things they're working on as well. Her sharing that bit about getting that feedback made her seem more human to me, created a greater
Mhm.
connection. And as leaders, sometimes we just need to be vulnerable to share those moments, share those personal stories, to share, I made this mistake. Here's what I learned. How do we move on? And I think that is very important in building that connection. There's a saying, people will forget what you say, they will forget what you do, but they won't forget how you make them feel. And by making that environment where it's safe to share those mistakes, share those learnings, they feel like they are seen and they're connected to you and can move forward.
And you and I have talked about this, and we really wanted to be explicit here. Can you dig into why connection is important and connecting it to both leadership and really business value?
Yeah, there are countless studies that show that people who are engaged are more productive. People who are engaged have higher productive teams. As you look at Google, they did a survey. Psychological safety was the number one factor in high performing teams, and everyone needs a high performing team. As you try to solve these unique problems, unique perspectives that can lend to that. With me being in risk and compliance, it's always about getting things done right. We don't want any mistakes. As I liaise with my colleagues in IT, we find ways we can marry the risk and compliance with IT to make solutions easier for everyone. If everyone is thinking like me, business would probably decrease. We wouldn't have all the automation. You need those different perspectives to really help move the business forward. And I just want to reiterate, especially in this environment where things are changing so quickly. Um, we turn the clocks back to the pandemic when everything had to change overnight and no one had a solution, but you put your different ideas together across the different generations and you're able to move forward. So it's really bringing all those perspectives in and making sure that they are heard.
Can you expand a little bit more on how you use change management in your role as a leader? How do you inform and build teams around that?
Sure. To drive change as a leader, often we've already created the change in our mind. We know where we're headed. Other people may not be at the same place we are. There's a continuation, there's a curve around change. So making sure you share the reason for the change, creating a bit of a vision, and you get voice. Everyone should have a voice. And I often tell my team, you have a voice, you may not get a vote. I'm going to listen to what you say, but it may not change the direction. It may inform the direction that we're going, but I need to make sure that I hear what you have to say, also collaborating across different units to see how we further bridge that silo, because it's easy to focus in on one area, but as you talk to others you get different ideas and you can continue to sort of move forward from that perspective.
So you've given us some really great examples on how to build some connection and belonging. But can you give us some practical ways that we could integrate now to build inclusivity in our workplace?
Yes, I think people follow behaviors, not titles. The things that leaders should do the most is role model the behavior that you want to see from others. Going back to, there's a book that came out in 86, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten, basically saying some of the basic humane things are important, demonstrating respect to others, demonstrating a curiosity, trying to understand, well, why do you have that view? Inviting others in. Um, the part about driving further collaboration. If there's a problem, who have you spoken to? Have you consulted others? As we look at the entire system, how have you brought others into this to create a solution that can work throughout different scenarios, make sure you have sustained success?
So, Ron, we have a really great question from Stephen that I wanted to pull out and ask you to
Sure.
talk a little bit more about. And what Stephen shares is he really appreciates the point of being vulnerable and sharing as a leader. But how do you share that vulnerability? And we know that can feel a little bit risky in the workplace. And what Stephen is really iterating on is I ask on this is what if your vulnerability could be misinterpreted as being weak or not showing that you're good enough? So how have you dealt with that, or how would you answer Stephen?
That's always a balance. I do, if you're on LinkedIn, I do a lot of articles. I read articles, and I sort of shared an article about being vulnerable. And one of my colleagues said, "Well, I really can't do that.
Mm.
Then you can be viewed as being weak." I shared, but it makes you human. First off, it makes you human. But secondly, you have other strengths. Everyone has a superpower, or something that you are exceptionally well at. By playing to your strengths and acknowledging where you are not as strong at, you sort of compensate for that different area. There is a fine line. You can't bleeding and just look like a leader who doesn't have direction. You don't know anything. That's not it. You have to be selective about what you share, but you have to be true and honest. I think that's an important factor around the vulnerability, to make it accepted. Because the story about the COO, where she shared she got feedback, that was a vulnerable moment, but in my mind, it actually elevated her as a leader and made her more approachable. So I challenge you to share something. Maybe you start out something small, something that is not great, a big deficit or a big mistake, and continue to build from there, because it's about being intentional. It's about building trust and just being respectful.
And Ron, I love your point there. And I think even being willing to say, I don't know, or what do
Mhm,
you think? Just
mhm.
creating an open space where you are willing, redefining what vulnerability looks like is so important.
That is a great point, and something that we learned at GE is if someone came to you with a question, you would throw it back to them. So, what do you think about the situation? Right.
Yes.
So, here's something I'm working on. How will you handle it? And then it's like, okay, they think through it, and actually, it gives them empowerment. They sort of feel, oh, I'm capable. I'm able to add value by just sometimes allowing them to contribute. We often underestimate our abilities, and especially if it's a strength for you, you think everyone can do it, but that's definitely not the case. Some people are great storytellers, some people are very analytical, and some are great public speakers. And if you ask them how they do it, they can't tell you because it's natural. So in your different areas, you have to sort of pick up from people and learn where you can.
Yes. And don't underestimate your strengths because some we
Don't
tend to do that.
don't underestimate your strengths. And I believe in playing to your strengths. I saw a recent article that said you perform 6 times greater if you play to your strengths, right? So you can
Mm.
become a superstar, and that can outshadow any deficit. You will have deficits. You need to know them. I think you protect around them. But just think, if you put effort into taking something that is -10 to something that's +20, if you do the +20, you're going to be much better. The -10, it's not going to be noticeable. So I try to lean into my strengths as much as possible and surround myself with people who can fill in those gaps, because I have gaps.
We all have gaps. And thank you, Stephen, for that question. That was really insightful. So, Ron, would I know you've displayed and talked about so many of your different values as a leader, but can you define a little bit more about how you approach leadership and what values you highlight? And how do you manage staying aligned with those values while working in a corporate setting, especially
Yeah,
in compliance, right? You have a lot of different
sure.
regulations and things working against you. So, riff a little bit.
A very, very insightful question about sort of the values. The values are the things that exist over time. Those are the things that you do when no one's watching. And I think because of my life and part of my faith, I have a moral compass that directs me in a certain way. So how do I align this with corporate America? There are three high level things I think of. You have to know your values and your boundaries, have a decision framework, and an accountability partners. Before you can enforce a balance, you need to know what's important to you. For me, one of my key values is transparency. If I want my team to know everything that I can actually share with them so that there are no surprises, I don't like surprises. Um, and they know I don't like surprises. So they know to bring something to me sooner rather than later, and we can work together to a solution. So knowing your solution, knowing your boundaries, excuse me, knowing your values, you must do that up front and they must be established. So when you're in these situations, you know what parameters to use. After knowing your values, you need a decision framework. And by that, in the heat of the moment, if you don't take time to apply a framework, you will go off the rails all the time. There are a couple of things I look at. 10, 10, 10. Someone created it. I think Susie Welch repeated it. If you're making a decision, think about what's the impact in 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years. So it shifts your perspective. So after the financial crisis, Wells Fargo took a certain action, JP Morgan took a certain action to rebound. Wells Fargo decided to create fake accounts to sort of boost their revenue. They got into all types of trouble. Had you just taken and said, okay, down the road, what does this mean versus now? It can look differently. So that's one of the filters or litmus tests I use is, 10, 10, 10, 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years. It gives a time parameter. Another one I think is if I had to tell my mom or my grandmom about this particular topic, what would they say to me? And being able to sell it to my grandmother means that I need to be very simplistic in how I tell it. I need to make it
Mhm.
plain. And would I disappoint her? Because I wouldn't want to
Mhm.
disappoint her. So the 10 10 10, then that family litmus test. And there was another one that when I started, it was like, if this conversation or action was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, how would you feel? I know in this digital age that may not have the same relevance, but the idea, if this was made public, how would you feel? If your kids saw it, if your partner saw it. So I think those are important frameworks to have as you take a decision in the moment. The third part is accountability partners, people who will hold you accountable. If you tell people that you're working on a specific task, believe you, they will remind you, well, you said you were doing this. And I think great reminders of accountability partners are children. Children will definitely remind, Dad, you said were not going to work past 7. It's now 7:15. You said we could do something differently. So knowing your values, spending time to explore, and the values need to be unique to you. It's not something you can just copy and say, um, my boss has this value is going to be my value, but spending time to look within to see what those values are, having the decision framework before you need to make that critical decision,
Mhm.
and surrounding yourself with accountability partners can help you balance who you are in difficult situations.
I love those. Those are really clear frameworks that we can apply today just to start making better decisions and being able to ethically really analyze what we're doing in our corporate environments. We had another great question come in
Sure.
asking about mentorship. So,
Mhm.
what role has mentorship played in your career, and how do you show up as a mentor, as a leader?
So I'm on camera. I'm stretching my arms completely out. Mentorship has played a huge role in my life. Um, and I want to spend a little time on differentiating between mentorship and sponsorship. Mentorship, people I go to, I have a personal board of directors. That's what I call it, my group of mentors. And I have people with different specialties. I have the person who is going to give it to me straight, no chaser, right between the eyes, going to lay it on the line. I have the cheerleader. If I need to feel good about myself, this person is there. But then I have functional people as well. If I have an HR topic or I have a marketing topic or IT, I can go to them. Mentors play a huge role because they can provide insight that you don't have. I don't want to learn all the lessons on my own. I'm willing to take someone else's advice as to how I should approach something. A sponsor is even a level higher than a mentor. This is someone who will put your name in the room for others. They will put their name on you as a person, saying, this person, let's take a chance on them. Give them this job just based on their name. They advocate for you, they make sure you're promoted. Their success is tied to your success. Um, Mentors are extremely important. And I've even had virtual mentors. What is a virtual mentor? There's someone who I admire. So I read their articles, I follow their YouTube videos, I follow their LinkedIn posts, I see how they navigate, and from that I can extract insights as well. Um, Continuous learning is essential. Just because you graduate doesn't mean you stop learning, and you definitely can learn from others.
And another question from our amazing group here. So thanks for the questions coming in. There's a question, and can you act as a mentor in this experience? And it was a follow up on the question of vulnerability. So,
Mhm.
how do you believe that maybe being a female leader might influence
Mm.
how vulnerability would show up? Do you have any advice on how to show that vulnerability, maybe adapting for what your gender?
That is a very good question. And if I may, I would say that any underrepresented class, whether it's a woman, an African American, or Latina, can have a similar challenge in the workplace. And one thing you have to understand your corporate culture. How you show up may vary by the corporate culture. And there is always, I dare to say, there can be a double standard based on gender, where if a man does something, he's seen as being proactive, and a woman, she's not very cooperative, right? Some non nice things come to mind. So knowing the corporate environment, also finding someone in that environment who you trust, who can potentially serve as a mentor, helping you to deliver a message and offer input. But I do think it's a more delicate situation if you are not the majority in the community. But it still has to happen, and maybe it happens in a smaller circle. Maybe you're not sharing your vulnerability in the audience of 25 staff members, but you're having coffee with someone and you notice they're going through something, you can share with them and begin to create in a smaller circle, and also once again limit the size of it.
Thank you, Ron. And I think you're highlighting, how do you find a sponsor? How do you find a sounding board to kind of test those
Mhm.
conversations and be able to test the way that you're showing up as a leader? So we have a couple more questions, and
Sure.
I'll bring this up from one of our attendees. How do we stay true to our values when maybe there are some actions or leadership that don't align with values?
Well, the first thing is you must stay true to your values, and I think knowing them. And if you're in an environment where you cannot stay true, sadly to say, that's probably not the environment for you, right? And you do have to make those tough decisions at times. You raise your hand, you try to correct things, but if you're constantly being bombarded with things that clash with who you are, that's really not the right environment to be. I think that's the short answer. You can try to navigate through, you can try to drive change, but if someone's asking you to do something that violates your integrity, point blank, if I'm asked to do something, let's roll it back. In my current um, organization, the person who had my role before was in a compromising position, and they didn't feel like they could raise their voice enough to be able to challenge it. So they said, you know what, this is not the right environment. I need to move on. So you do have to take those tough calls.
And Ron, to bring us home, what advice, what closing word of advice would you give us to lead with purpose, integrity, and build that connection?
First off, I want to say that leadership is a huge job. You have a ripple effect on all those that you encounter and the people they encounter. What I want you to, the first thing I'll say is don't be an actor. What do I mean? Um, Actors seek applause, not impact. As a leader, you always must drive for impact. You need to drive for something bigger than yourself. You need to drive for a mission that can drive change sustainably. Actors rely on scripts versus genuine connection. Uh, as a leader, you want to connect with the people. If you're delivering a message about structural changes you need to have, reading a script will not always work out well. Yes, you may need notes, but you need to share genuinely how you feel about a situation. A Harvard Business Review study revealed that 58% of employees don't trust senior leaders when they have questions about their communication style. So don't be an actor around that piece. Actors switch their persona based on the audience they're around. So one movie, this person is a hero, another movie, they're a villain. As a leader, people need to know what they're getting from day to day. So you need to just be mindful of that. Um, the last thing I want to say is that acting takes a lot of energy. It can actually create burnout. So, as a leader, you need to be authentic. So, what does that mean? Lead with transparency, align your actions with your words, own your mistakes, be consistent. People don't have to wonder where you are, and prioritize purpose over perception.
Ron, I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time today. Somehow our time together flew by. So thank you for just providing such key insights and really impactful advice for us to take with us.
I definitely appreciate the time. Always happy to do that. So, in closing, there is no playbook for where we are. People follow behaviors, not titles. And people will always remember how you made them feel, even though they may forget what you said or what you did. So, make people feel good about themselves and respect them.
Beautiful, huge piece of advice. Thank you so much, Ron. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good day,
And to
all.
wrap, I appreciate all of these insights. Thank you, all of you who are dropping in questions, comments, pieces to share with us. So, to close us up and wrap us up today, I hope you enjoyed this really impactful conversation. We're really thrilled. And if you scan this QR code now, you can register for the rest of our series. We are here the first Monday of every month from 12 to 12:30, giving you those actionable, bite-sized pieces of advice to help you be a better leader. And then what I'd also plant with you, there's a lot of ways that you can get involved with CLOE and the Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness. There's a leadership accelerator program. We offer customized programs to lead interactive sessions with your company to bring these leadership sessions to life and help you really deliver an impact. And we have our leadership coaching certification, which allows you to get real world coaching experience under the supervision of coaches who are doing it in real life. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Feel free to scan this QR code and register for any upcoming open houses. We're so grateful to have you with us, and we will see you next month in March where we have another really exciting conversation. Thank you again to Ron. Thank you to Maddie, and we will see you next month. Bye, everybody.